Hello everyone, my name is Meghan LeVota and I offer wisdom, tools, and support for personality integration. My personality type is the ENFJ, and I'm going to talk with you all today about how I developed my auxiliary introverted intuition function and what that process was like for me. I realized I haven't really made a video about this because sort of the assumption when you're first learning about type, you learn which functions are your functions. And when you're first learning, there's a lot of different theories out there, whether you're looking at socionics, whether you're looking at John Beebe's 8-function model, or if you're looking at just a 4-function model, or maybe you're only looking at what your dominant and auxiliary function is. So really, at least for me, whenever I first learned that I was an ENFJ, it was like, oh, okay, I use FE and NI, and those are the functions I'm good at. But the reality is, your dominant function is completely on autopilot. I did a video about what it looks like when you are completely on autopilot and how that is something to sort of try and stay away from, that I can link somewhere around here. But yeah, your autopilot function is your dominant function, and this is the function that you use just without even trying. It is pretty much, you're like a slave to it. Everything that your dominant function wants, you know, it's just you. It's just what you naturally do in every way. Whereas your aux function, it is also natural to you, but you still are going to, a lot of people say that you don't develop it until you're like 18, early 20s. I'm not sure my thoughts on that necessarily, but I do think the reason why in my 8-function model, I call the dominant function the autopilot function and the auxiliary function the growth key. I call it the growth key because it is the key to your growth. Yes, it is something that comes natural to you. You have the key to it naturally, but you also have to turn the key. Because if you don't naturally focus on balancing out your dominant function with your aux function, then you're going to be really off balance, because you're either going to be judging way too much and not perceiving enough, or you're going to be way too focused on the external world and, not your internal world. And so that is sort of the first thing you can do for anybody who's looking to grow, is just ask yourself, how much am I leaning on my aux function? Because no matter what your stack is, which I will post that below for those of you who are still learning about everyone's stacks, your function stack, if you were just to look at everybody's top 2 functions, between the two of them, you have a function that is extroverted and a function that's introverted. And so if you were to focus on your aux function, you would be moving more to the middle, more ambiverted, if you were able to balance those a little bit more. You would be a little bit less extreme. This would take an introvert going completely from, never talking to anyone, to an extrovert, learning that they need to take time alone sometimes. And, so between the two of those, you also have both a perceiving and a judging function. And so if you are a judger first, so those are the EJ and the IP types, then you pretty much already, when you go into the world, when you are perceiving things, you kind of already have an opinion, either that, whether that's a value judgment or a logical judgment. You're kind of going at it with a preconceived opinion, about how things should be, or what is true, or what is kind, those sorts of things. So, it balances out to be a little bit more like listening and taking things in, whatever that looks like for you. And if you're a perceiver first, if you were to focus on your growth key function, then you would be having like a tool to help you discern what it is that you're seeing. So, no matter what your personality type is, your growth key function is very beneficial, and you have to turn the key yourself. It's not something that you're just going to do naturally. So now to get into me and my story, and I would like you guys to comment below sort of your experience developing your growth key function, and if you relate to my story at all. So for me, as an ENFJ, I discovered that I was an ENFJ when I was 17 years old. And when I was 17, when I was in high school, every single weekend, both Friday and Saturday, I was hosting slumber parties at my house, inviting at least 6 people. And I was posting all of our inside jokes on Facebook. I was wanting to make all these videos and take stupid pictures. This was like 2011, 2012. So, Facebook was really big back then. I was always like, let's create a fake rap video, or let's do tie-dyeing or whatever. And I always had things I wanted to do and creative ideas, and I always needed company, and I always had crushes on someone that I would text my friends like, do you think so-and-so likes me? Like, what do you think about this? And to be honest, I did not know how to spend a moment alone. I did not know how to process how I perceive a situation. I needed to gather everybody's opinion about me in order to know who I was. If I had a crush on someone, I needed to ask everybody, do you think this person likes me? Before I could just, trust my own intuition. And I did not trust myself. I was always looking for feedback. And if I didn't get feedback, I would get very anxious. If a friend couldn't hang out and I was feeling super vulnerable, I did not know how to sit in that vulnerability. I did not know how to just quiet my mind. So, I started to realize as soon as I learned about personality type, I knew, okay, there are other people out there who feel really like they're always the ones giving to their friends and not getting back in return. There are other people out there who feel like, pretty much they give too much and they're being walked over and whatever. And the reality that I didn't understand at the time then is that I was so unaware of my boundaries that I couldn't even voice them or communicate them. And so I felt taken advantage of for kind of no reason, in the sense that I would offer my love and support unconditionally without really asking for anything in return. And then I would get disappointed that I didn't have a friend like me who was giving me attention, when in reality, I was the friend like me that I needed the whole time. As cheesy as that sounds, I started my self-growth journey whenever I was about to go to college, and I Googled books about feeling happy or something, because I was just I sort of realized this is a problem. I've got to figure out how to make myself happy. Especially I think knowing I was an ENFJ helped me realize that I was not the only person that felt this way. And as an FE Dom, knowing what other people are feeling and knowing you're not alone is extremely important. So I started reading. I read a book about Buddhism and Zen, and I read a book about meditation, and I read Be Here Now, I think it's called, by Eckhart Tolle. I read Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. I read The Four Agreements. I read all these stuff that was really making me. I read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, I think is how you say his name. I read all these things that started to trigger some curiosity about how the universe was run. And I've always been a deep thinker. If you were to look at me Like, I clearly was an intuitive child, but I didn't know how to use NI. I didn't really know, I wasn't really comfortable just sitting there and just trusting it, which, just to be clear, just to define NI, for those of you who don't know or need a refresher, NI stands for introverted intuition, and introversion is your subjective inner world, where intuition is the world of abstract concepts. So if you have subjective abstract concepts, that is pretty much organizing all of the patterns and concepts that you've seen in the world into one perspective. It's a very precise perspective. All introverted functions are more precise than extroverted. They're also more subjective, which means that you cannot apply them to every situation and every person. And, NI and SI are both based off of, your personal experiences to some extent. SI is a lot more hands-on, tangible sensory experiences. But, my own experience and the meaning that I created about that experience is still my NI, that I've used those experiences to help shape my perception about how I feel the world is. And so I think that seeing other people who had stronger perspectives and philosophies on things really made me start to think about what's my perspective, And, I use TI as well, and so this sort of is a little conflated. Maybe NTJs might not relate as much, but because whenever I am in introverted mode, for me, that looks like NI and TI. It is sort of like wanting to find both my perspective and also my opinion about that perspective and my logical reasoning behind the perspective. So, around this time when I was first developing my NI, I wasn't super into I wasn't super logical. I didn't really know what I thought about things, but I was still trying to figure out how I perceive things, and I was still sort of theorizing about and making there be a sort of unified meaning behind what is this energy that Earth is run on. Is there a God? A lot of NI users are spiritual, and I don't think that you have to be spiritual to be an NJ, but I do think that if you think about it, both SI and NI are the subjective subjective ways of perceiving. So if you are subjectively perceiving something physically, that is pretty much your body, your physical experiences. So what would be an example of something that is both subjective and intangible? I feel like SI is the body and NI is your soul. Both of them are your subjective experiences of life. So, the soul is just the best word I have to use. That doesn't mean every NI user is going to agree with that terminology, but whatever it is, it's whatever is the energy that you can't see that is behind me, the energy that you can't see behind this tree, the energy that created everything. And that's why a lot of NJs end up being spiritual. That's sort of a tangent, but it's not something that's intrinsically within the NI user. It's just that whenever you're focused on the intangible, it allows you to sort of create, what do you think that intangibleness is? Where do you think it comes from? Because I'm wondering, what is the meaning behind this wind? Why is there wind? Why are things run this way? So that's why, it's a little bit existential, it's a little bit esoteric, But that's just because that's what NI is looking to do. NI is looking to perceive reality and have a subjective understanding on what reality is in an introverted way. And I know, it sounds very convoluted, so you have to honestly, I know it might sound like I'm just sort of saying a definition, but you have to really look at it and think about it, because you have to sort of shut your eyes, think about it, take a deep breath, and really it's just the whole world of the intangible is a little bit mysterious. And if you're trying to find, if the world of the intangible is introverted, then, NI, it's just nobody is going to have the same perspective on what the universe is and how it works than me, because every NI user has their own interpretation. NI takes interpretations and makes meaning out of what it sees. And before I developed my NI, and before I allowed that to come through, which was started by reading, which, reading in and of itself doesn't mean all of a sudden I was using NI, but, what was I saying? Gosh, what was I saying? Sorry. I forgot what I was saying just there, about NI. Really, I know what I was going to say, is that before I spent time contemplating what meaning and interpretation I was putting on things and the why behind things, then I still used NI. But it was just more unconscious. And so I still had that reflex of my own subjective meaning being placed on everything that I see. And so developing my NI, using my growth key, is pretty much contemplating what is the subjective meaning and interpretation that I have behind everything I see and the energy that I see. Taking more ownership of that, and asking myself the tough questions, spending time in contemplation and reflection about why I am the way I am, why the world is the way it is, why people are the way they are, what even is reality, all that. I started taking lots of philosophy classes in college, and I feel like NI users really excel in philosophy, and I probably got the best grades in philosophy than any other class. Because for me, it was okay, you're telling me that this is the way that this person looks at this, and you're telling me that this is the way that this other philosopher looks at this. And then the test was just here's a perspective. Who held that perspective? That's so easy to me. It's clearly it was this person, because my NI is I know my perspective. I want to know your perspective, and I want to know your perspective. I the different perspectives that people have are so unique. And what am I saying? Those perspectives that they hold are, I don't know, it's easy for me to tell the difference between them, because my NI is paying attention to that stuff, to what my perspective is, the why behind everything, the meaning that I give the world. Well, what meaning do you give the world? And see, this meaning that you give the world compared to yours, I see beneath that how there is this sort of deeper understanding that is all interconnected within one another, compared to this person's understanding is also interconnected. Where NE, on the other hand, will sort of, I get the gist of that idea, I get the gist of that idea, but they might conflate the entire philosophy behind it, because they are just seeing this is an idea, this is an idea. They aren't seeing the root of this is my entire philosophy behind the meaning that I'm giving this world. You know, it's not that deep. It's more able to pick up ideas faster without really digging to create your own fresh look on a subject, if that makes sense. Anyway, as I grew, and you know, honestly, with SE experiences that happen, this is true for any NISE user. If something bad happens in the SE, then NI is going to want to interpret, why did that happen? Whether you're an SP or an NJ, it doesn't matter. If you're an SP, you're going to probably do something without thinking first about the consequences, and then you'll learn through experience, hey, this gave me a consequence I didn't want, and so I might not do that again. Whereas NJs, they're going to have the perspective that they have, take action expecting a result based on their perspective, and then whenever that perspective is challenged through an action that you didn't expect, whenever chaos is thrown at you, it's like, oh, well, I guess my perspective was wrong. And you know, that's how your perspective refines. For example, as a kid, or like in early college, I was like, love is everything. Love is what makes the world go round. Okay, that's a cool perspective to have. And then I would take an action toward like a crush or like someone I was dating. And then something would happen and it wasn't what I expected was going to happen. And then I'm like having to rethink what my perspective is and understand why that happened. I can't just like not know why something happened. I need desperately to understand why things happen so that I don't make the mistake again. And so honestly, part of it is just growing up. Every ENFJ and ENTJ, when they're growing up, they're going to come across scenarios that they don't understand, and then they're going to get compelled to want to understand it. You know, my NI was even acting up whenever I was like 17, and I was like, I want to know who I am. I want to know why I'm not happy. Please tell me the answer. You know, that's very NI as well. But now I'm at a place where I know God, I know what I feel is the universe, whatever my relation is with it, to where I don't take any action unless I check in and then tune in with myself. My rule of thumb is do not do any action unless you are positively compelled through your own spirit. You feel positively compelled in a direction. You feel your higher self pulling you. I feel like I sense the string, the divine string between me and all that is, and I feel, when I feel inspiration, I go. I follow it. Now I completely am of service to it. And I think that that is a growth key for anyone, is you already are naturally of service to your dominant. How can you also be of service to your aux function? Now I'm of service in the sense where if something does not feel right in my intuition, based on my perspective, what can I do about that? Is there, like, am I gonna just ignore my intuition? Am I gonna ignore my bells going off and just pretend like it's fine in order to keep the peace in an FE way? No. I am going to continue to want to understand other people and the world around me and myself, but in the process, I feel like I know what the difference is between love and fear. I know what the difference is between being positively compelled and being and fear trying to scare me. And I feel like I could recognize the impulses within me of, you know, what feels like my destiny, what feels like my soul's calling, what feels like my purpose versus what feels like a fear response, trying to keep myself safe. And if I can choose every single day to choose what my intuition sees, then that is helping me get in the right direction. And I couldn't have done that without, you know, opening that can of worms, which is NI, which really is a can of worms. So anyway, if you are interested in figuring out what your personality type is, if you want to know more about this stuff, or if you want me to help you and offer my advice, I do offer mentorship. I've got lots of other fun links below you can check out, such as a free Facebook group for discussing personality typology for self-growth. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.